The jaw tension that's there before you're fully awake. The gut that hasn't felt settled in longer than you can remember. The chest that tightens, not dramatically, just enough, before certain meetings, certain emails, certain conversations. Most people carrying these symptoms have already explained them to themselves. Getting older, being a tense person, the general weight of a stressful life. Here's what almost no burnout content gets around to saying. Those symptoms aren't happening alongside the burnout. They are the burnout. Your body has been keeping a record in its own language, in its own tissue, and it has been trying to show you that record for longer than you realize. This video is the translation, not an alarm, not a list of things that are wrong with you. A precise account of what years of chronic overwork actually does to a nervous system that was never designed to run this long without genuine recovery, and what changes the moment you understand what your body has been telling you. There's a system in the body built for emergencies. You've heard it called fight or flight. The clinical name is the HPA axis, hypothalamic pituitary adrenal, and its job, when it's working correctly, is to mobilize everything you have in response to a real and present threat. Heart rate up, cortisol released, digestion paused, immune response deprioritized, jaw muscles braced, shoulders raised, all of it pointing toward one thing: survive this moment. This system was designed for events. A predator, a collision, a genuine crisis. And when the event ends, the system is supposed to return to baseline. Cortisol dropping, digestion resuming, muscles releasing, the body returning to something it can sustain. The problem, the specific problem that years of high-functioning burnout creates, is that for a lot of people in this experience, the event never ended. Not because the threat was always real, but because the nervous system stopped being able to tell the difference between an actual emergency and a full calendar, between genuine danger and a performance review, between physical threat and the low-grade, constant pressure of being someone who cannot afford to fall short. Research on chronic stress consistently shows that when the HPA axis runs in activation for months, and especially for years, the body doesn't just feel different. It reorganizes around the threat. It recalibrates. It begins to treat the elevated state as normal. And the baseline, the place the body was supposed to return to, quietly, gradually, stops being available. This is not a character flaw. This is what sustained threat does to a system that was built for survival, not endurance. So what does that reorganization actually look like in a body, in a life? Start with the jaw. The masseter muscle, the one that clenches when you're bracing, is one of the first places chronic threat response settles. It's involuntary. It happens during sleep, during focus, during the kind of concentration that high achievers spend most of their working hours in. Years of that. And the jaw stops releasing fully. The tension becomes the resting state. People buy mouth guards. They get told they're grinding their teeth. They attribute it to stress and move on. The gut follows a similar logic. When the threat response is active, digestion is deprioritized. Blood flow redirected toward the muscles and the brain, away from the digestive tract. For an acute event, that's fine. The digestion catches up afterward. But for years of chronic activation, the gut develops its own memory, motility disrupted, microbiome shifted, a system that was never designed to be perpetually paused, beginning to show the strain of being perpetually paused. IBS diagnoses. Unexplained nausea, a gut that never fully settles. Attributed to diet, to anxiety, to being a sensitive person, not attributed to what it actually is. Then there's the immune system. Cortisol is, among other things, an anti-inflammatory agent. In the short term, that's useful. It keeps the body from overreacting to threat. But in the long term, chronically elevated cortisol suppresses immune function. The body gets less effective at fighting infection. Recovery from illness takes longer. That low-grade cold that never quite clears. The pattern of getting sick every time something lets up. Every vacation, every long weekend. Because the moment the cortisol drops, the immune system catches up on everything it was suppressing. And then there's something harder to name. Something this audience often doesn't mention first because it doesn't feel medical. The flatness, the specific absence of genuine pleasure. Not depression, exactly, not sadness, but a kind of muted quality to experiences that used to land differently. Food that tastes fine but not the way it used to. Moments that should feel good but arrive wrapped in a faint static. the inability to be fully present in experiences the mind knows should matter. This has a mechanism. Dopamine, the neurotransmitter most associated with anticipation and reward, is dysregulated by chronic stress exposure. The reward system, run at high demand for long enough, begins to require more stimulation for less return. The baseline for what counts as meaningful pleasure quietly rises. And ordinary life, the Sunday evening, the quiet dinner, the moment of stillness, stops being able to meet it. Jaw, gut, immune, cardiovascular strain building in the background, and a reward system that has been slowly losing its range. These are not separate problems. They are the same problem, expressing in different tissue, in a body that has been trying to tell you something for a very long time. Here is the part that matters most, and the part that almost nothing explains. If you've tried to rest, actually tried, vacation taken, weekend protected, sleep prioritized, and found that the rest didn't land the way it was supposed to. If you came back from time off still tired, if you woke up from a full night's sleep and felt the weight already waiting, that experience has an explanation. And the explanation is not that you did rest wrong. The nervous system doesn't know the meeting is over. That's not a metaphor. That's a physiological description of what happens when the HPA axis has been running in activation long enough to recalibrate the body's baseline upward. The external threat can be removed. The laptop closed, the out-of-office on, the beach genuinely present, and the internal state doesn't follow. Because the body learned, over months and years of evidence, that the threat is always coming back. And a system built for survival does not stand down until it has been shown, slowly, through accumulated experience, that standing down is actually safe. A single week doesn't undo years of learning. A long weekend doesn't discharge what accumulated over a decade. The nervous system is not being stubborn. It is being accurate, based on everything it has been shown so far. This is the moment worth sitting with. Because for most people in prolonged burnout, the failure of rest to actually restore them becomes its own source of shame. I took the vacation and I still feel awful. Maybe I'm just broken. Maybe this is just who I am now. But what's actually happening is not a character verdict. It's a physiological pattern. The body learned that the threat is persistent, and it is waiting, conserving, bracing, monitoring for the evidence that things have genuinely changed. The emotional climax of this video is not a warning. It's a translation. Your body is not failing. It is communicating in the only language it has that the system it's been running cannot continue indefinitely. And what it is communicating, the jaw, the gut, the flatness, the fatigue that sleep doesn't touch, is not a verdict on who you are. It is a record of what you've been asked to sustain. There is a difference, and that difference is the beginning of something. If you want to understand the full picture of what chronic overwork does to the nervous system, cortisol, dopamine, the vagal pathways, the immune cascade, there's a plain language guide in the description that covers all of it in one place, without clinical jargon and without judgment. It was built specifically for people who want to understand the mechanism completely, not to alarm, but because understanding removes the moral charge. It's in the description and in the pinned comment. Here is what this changes. Not everything. Not immediately. The jaw doesn't release the moment you name what's causing the tension. The gut doesn't settle because you read an explanation. The body doesn't reset on intellectual understanding alone. But something shifts when misattribution ends. Because here's what misattribution does. The years of, this is just aging and I'm a tense person, and this is just stress, it routes the problem away from its actual source. When the jaw is a dental problem, you buy a mouth guard. When the gut is a dietary issue, you change what you eat. When the flatness is just who you've become, you learn to live with it. And the root cause, the nervous system still running a threat response that was never fully resolved, continues, unaddressed, accumulating. Misattribution is not a personal failure. It is what happens when no one gives you the framework to read what your body is actually saying. But the moment the symptoms have a different explanation, a physiological one, not a moral one, something becomes possible that wasn't before. Not a cure, not a system. One thing, the ability to treat the root cause instead of managing the symptoms one at a time in isolation. The body you've been living in for the last several years, the one that tenses before it needs to, that doesn't digest cleanly, that stopped finding pleasure in the things that used to land, that body is not the final version of you. It is a body that adapted to conditions it was given. And adaptation, including the kind that feels permanent, is not the same as permanence. The HPA axis can recalibrate downward. Cortisol can return to a range that isn't suppressing immune function. The dopamine system can recover its range when the demand on it gradually, sustainably decreases. Not overnight. Not on a timeline that looks like a productivity goal, but the direction of change is available. What changes today is not the body. What changes today is the explanation. And a different explanation means a different set of choices becomes visible. The jaw tension is no longer a personality trait. The gut is no longer a dietary mystery. The flatness is no longer the person you've become. They are signals from a nervous system that has been waiting for longer than it should have had to wait for someone to read them correctly. You're reading them now. If you want to go deeper on the mechanism, the full physiological picture, in plain language, without needing a medical background to follow it, the guide in the description was built exactly for this moment. Link in the description and in the pinned comment. Which of these did you spend the longest time attributing to something other than burnout? And what was the moment you started to question that explanation? Your nervous system doesn't know yet that it's allowed to stand down. That's not a flaw in you. That's an accurate description of how learning works in a system built for survival. It learned the threat was persistent because it was shown repeatedly over years that the threat was persistent. It will learn something different through the same process. Slowly, through accumulated evidence, through moments where standing down doesn't result in catastrophe. That process does not begin with a program. It doesn't begin with a resolution. It begins with understanding, the kind that converts a private, slightly embarrassing collection of physical symptoms into a recognizable physiological pattern with a name and a mechanism, and therefore a different kind of response available. The jaw tension is not who you are. The flatness is not where you end. The exhaustion that sleep doesn't touch is not a verdict. It is a nervous system that has been running a threat response for years and has not yet been shown that the conditions have changed. Your body has been keeping this record. Every clenched jaw in the morning, every gut that wouldn't settle, every moment of rest that arrived as guilt instead of recovery. It kept the record faithfully, in the only language available to it. You've read it now. And what the record says is not that you are broken. It says that you sustained something that was not designed to be sustained indefinitely, and that the body, being precise and honest about what it has experienced, is showing you exactly that. Your nervous system doesn't know you're safe yet. It's been running a threat response for months, possibly years. The fact that rest doesn't feel restful isn't a personal failure. It is a physiological pattern, and physiological patterns, unlike character flaws, can be changed, slowly, imperfectly, without an audience, but changed.